Can you see? Okay, yeah. Will you do this on your own or should I do it first?
I'll do it on my own.
Okay, great.
Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sah Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhaitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Very good.
Vasudevendra Yogendram Natva Jnanapradam Gurum Mumukshunnahitarthaya Tattva Bodho Bhidhiyate.
Mumukshunam. That anuswara here is the ma.
Mumukshunam hitarthaya Tattva Bodho Bhidhiyate. Nityam Shuddham Nirabhasam Nirakaram Niranjanam Nityabodham Chidanandam Gurum Brahma Nama.
आपका कैमरा ऑन है
वरना ऑफ करते ऐसे करना.
साधन चतुष्टयं संपन्ना अधिकारिणां मोक्षण साधन भूतं तत्व विवेक प्रकारं वक्ष्यामः.
Very good.
साधन चतुष्टयं किम्? नित्यानित्य वस्तु विवेकः इहामुत्रार्थफलभोग विरागः समाधि षट्क संपत्तिः मुमुक्षुत्वं चेति. नित्यानित्य वस्तु विवेकः कः? नित्यवस्त्वेकं ब्रह्म तद्व्यतिरिक्तं सर्वमनित्यम् अयमेव नित्यवस्तु विवेकः. इह स्वर्गभोगेषु इच्छाराहित्यं विरागः कः? इह स्वर्गभोगेषु इच्छाराहित्यम् इहामुत्रार्थफलभोगविरागः. समाधि साधन संपत्तिः का? समोदम उपरति तितिक्षा श्रद्धा समाधानं च इति. शमः कः? मनोनिग्रहः. दमः कः? चक्षुरादि बाह्येन्द्रिय निग्रहः. उपरम कः? स्वधर्म अनुष्ठानमेव.
Swadharmanushthanamev.
स्वधर्मानुष्ठानमेव. शीतोष्ण सुख दुःखादिसहिष्णुत्वं. तितिक्षः कः? शीतोष्ण सुख दुःखादिसहिष्णुत्वं. सहिष्णुत्वम्
तितीक्षा का
तितिक्षा का
शीतोष्णसुखदुःखादिसहिष्णुत्वम्
सहिष्णुत्वम् श्रद्धा कीदृशी गुरुवेदान्तवाक्यादिषु विश्वासः समाधानं किं चित्तैकाग्रता.
Excellent. So, very good. Thank you. It's very, very good. So, we will continue from here. We are doing Uparama. In Uparama, we saw that it basically means the state of inward focus, a withdrawal from the extroverted focus. Going along with the analogy of the horses and the senses, the mind automatically moves outward with the senses. So, for any study to hold a study which is not sensory oriented, but a study which is experience based, which is what we say Anubhava Siddham, which is recognition of an existing experience. But somehow, though it is available for recognition, we automatically, because the way our instruments are made, sensory instruments are made, we are automatically drawn outside. So the senses remain attracted to these sense objects and the mind remains involved within it. And even if there is a faculty of thinking available, most of the times we don't employ it because the force of the world and its activities and its pleasures that it can offer seemingly, quote unquote, not really, but to us it may look as if there is some pleasure there. So this movement remains outward. But Vedanta says for any truth verification, for any knowledge-based truth verification, which is actually already your experience, but you need to recognize it, the mind will have to be remaining in a calm state, withdrawn from its preoccupied attention. So that preoccupied state of the mind, whether it is with reference to pleasures or avoiding pain or doing external duties, whatever it be, but the mind, when it external duties, not in the real sense, but seeming what our mind feels as karna hai, ye karna hai, fir wo karna hai, fir that involvement of the mind that remains, keeps the mind preoccupied with planning and organizing and scheming and etc., etc. The minute we wake up, we see that our minds are just busy with all kinds of thoughts. So this state of a thought preoccupation, whose objective is only the objects of the world. And here, by objects, we include all people in it also. So when the mind is completely absorbed, preoccupied by some thought or the other, and the content of that thought is some object of the world. It could be a memory, it could actually be a physical contact. It could be something your eyes are seeing or your ears are hearing, or it could be some past experience you're remembering, or as I said before, it could be some future planning you are doing. But the mind थॉट का कंटेंट क्या है. When you examine that content of the thought there, you realize it is something to do with दुनिया को लेके. दुनिया का विषय है. दुनिया विषय है हमारे मन के विचारों का. Thought in Sanskrit is a very beautiful word called vritti. This vritti means किस चीज की हमारे में वृत्ति है. What makes it a little impersonal, though it becomes more objective, means because it's impersonal आप उसको objectify कर सकते हो जल्दी. Thought word can be generalized to every thought, but vritti is a very subjective experience. Our minds, we say, are like sponges. It's extremely impressionable. So what happens? Normal sense contact, life contact, vyavahar is one word that Shastra uses for every worldly contact and association. Vyavahara drishti se, whatever happens to the experience in the world, mind holds the impressions of it. Mind is impressionable. That impression that one holds in the mind, because mind is not gross like the brain is or the heart is or like liver is and kidney is, and it is not going to be something which will die away with the body. This impressionable mind is something that you hold within yourself as the sense of your identity also. वो स्थान वही है जहाँ आपकी sense of identity है. All the impressions that you form in are deeply seated in that, call it a chamber just for its own communication's sake. But it's in the mind that you hold it there. This hold means you don't hold it, it just gets held. It's impressioned there. When you meet someone, he says, okay, watch your first impressions, because your first impressions sometimes are the last impressions. I do not believe in it. I, in fact, sometimes think it's the contrary. Many times your first impressions are all wrong impressions, and then later on you realize something else was actually discovered as the right thing. So when you see, it's just a question of saying impression means before I could think and register it, the perception is already registered. Impression ho gaya uska. Before I became aware of that, I had already picked the impression. Where had I picked the impression? How did it happen? You had to do nothing. It was not a voluntary picking up. The fact that your senses contact the sense objects and your mind is along with it, this mind is the place where those impressions are enforced. I like that word only for the sake because it's very communicable. जब आप क्ले पे कुछ भी जोर से ऐसे लगा दो. In olden days, I think, I don't know about now, but if you just want to hold, I think they have started now once again for kids, children, when you want to hold their first impressions, their portraits now coming out of the child's hands and child's feet and things like that. It's becoming an art form now. But in olden days, when a newly married girl would come home and they would put her this example is going to make sense even further as we move in the class. The very first feet that she would bring in the home were called as Lakshmi Charan. There was the impression, या वो कुमकुम के पानी में होता था, या वो clay के उसमें, या हाथ पे लगा के, something like this. There's different traditions. But the idea is, the example is to say, it needs just that little force. It needs actually not a force, it needs a contact. Idea of this example is that it needs a contact to form the impression. इंद्रियों का उनके विषयों के साथ जब कांटेक्ट होता है तो impression mind में बन जाता है. This impression in the mind is what is actually called vritti. Impressions we cannot recognize because they're happening all the time from all the indriyas. Not only indriyas, but it's such a complex process that to our attention is only a very minuscule part that comes to our attention कि हम पे impression क्या पड़ा, किस चीज का पड़ा. It's very, very small. That also, if you really have deeper interest in life of some, as we say, spiritual growth or some other goal of life, then you start becoming aware of it. But otherwise, normal life mein, nobody bothers with this word like impression pad raha hai mind pe. Maximum you are doing is, okay, if you go for an interview, give a good impression, things like that. If you're going to, that's it. Your idea of an impression is only this much. In society, व्यवहारिक दृष्टि से impression only can mean this much. But शास्त्रिक दृष्टि से, mind में being a sponge-like, impressionable material is mind. It's extremely subtle, not perceivable to the gross mind, to the gross इंद्रिया. इंद्रिया तो अपना कांटेक्ट कर रही है, बट उसका इंप्रेशन, कुमकुम का अगर पैरों के साथ, पानी में घुला हुआ कुमकुम पैरों के साथ, they are two different things. But the minute they came in contact, they formed the impression the minute the foot was placed on the ground. Impression word is vritti. मन में वृत्तिज हैं हमारी. That vritti word also has another word in a different context. It's also samskar hai. Impression is many times called samskar. Samskar has many meanings. In the context I'm only talking of, sanskar is something that your impressions have gone. Based on those impressions, you have this, what in English we call as thought, and in Shastriya language we call them vritti. What your impressions are, exactly what your impressions are going to be your vritti. You can't have a vritti without an impression before. And an impression cannot be there till there was a sense contact. And though I'm always using I as a reference point, sense contact is this also. So you have to remember the five senses all the time, every time I use the word just sense contact, and I may use lakshana, upalakshana of I as one of the pointing to all the five, and 10 later on, organs of action. But this vritti, I'm saying, is all the time focused outside. हमारे अंदर वृत्तियां क्या है? This vritti is all sense contact based impressions. Call them thoughts for simplification, but you may kind of divert the point, replace it with the understanding. Vritti and impression are linked, are co-joined. What your impressions are inside is from where these vrittis are. At that level of vritti, you can call it thoughts. Because they can be objectified. It's easy. This mind is all the time outside. क्योंकि इंद्रिय तो हमारी बाहर चल रही है. Since it is only paying attention outside, if you want to see your existing experience, if you want to become aware of the fact that you are aware, if you want to become conscious of the fact that you are a conscious being, if you want knowledge of the fact that you are a conscious being, you're conscious, and this consciousness is what is your experience, but it's not tangible. You can't grasp it today somehow and say, I am only conscious. That consciousness seems to be engulfed with names and forms and ideas and all vrittis. I am conscious of something or the other. That conscious of sound, conscious of sight, conscious of smell, conscious of. I'm calling myself a conscious being, an aware being, but my consciousness seems to be limited to my sense perceptions. Vedanta says this consciousness of yours is independent of sense perception, and this is your true identity. Until you discover this, means it is already your nature. You are already that. But somehow, the very thing that must be engaged in its recognition is already preoccupied by things that we have to do in the world, or things I have to become, or I have to go, or I have to achieve, or all the sharir se jud ke preoccupation of the mind with reference to everything that's happening in the world. Yeah? And sometimes we are so superficial, sometimes we are so superfluous. Usne kya kaha, usne kya. It can go to absurdity actually from one standpoint. But the idea is our minds are preoccupied by some object or the other. Uparama is one of the finest qualities which is indicative of your capacity to withdraw the mind from these engaging thoughts and hold it in its own place. Means man, mera. Kali is not in the sense of a vacuum, but is so quiet, is so calm, is so shant. Nothing gurgling, no vrittis are bubbling inside. Another example I like to give very often for this vritti status and the restlessness of the indriya and the man, and let's understand that they almost simultaneously go together. This is for analysis that Vedanta is breaking it. But we don't find that there's a gap between my indriyas getting excited and my mind getting excited. So soon is this, so quick is this association of the senses and the mind. The example I very often give is, when you make dosa and your tawa is hot and you sprinkle some water on it, what happens to that water for a little while? It's like sab jagah phaila hua bubbling. The minute it's in contact with heat, the water is jumping, dancing, kuch kuch kar raha hai. That what it does, that excitement in it, that restlessness in it, that's the state of vritti. But when the waters got evaporated again, what is remaining behind is quiet. That tawa in itself has nothing to do with water. But the minute there is some water, gets restless, the water evaporates, it's come back to its state. Mind by itself is actually a calm, quiet, is just an instrument. It's just a receptacle of the senses. It connects them, it holds them. It connects the impressions together. Ideally, those who get into the spiritual life or those who employ the method of wanting to get more aware, they let the stimulus go to the buddhi. That receipt, reaction, response. So the minute there is a receipt, the reaction is not straight away sent back to response. The reaction is sent to buddhi to examine, and the buddhi then tells what reaction, and then that reaction is sent as a response. That level of training is what is possible, but mostly missed out. When it doesn't go through this process of reasoning and figuring it out, mind is all the time agitated, vyakul hai, aisa shaky. I am coming up with too many examples. I don't know if all these examples are confusing you, if I'm giving more examples than necessary. But uh, one last example before I move on. Like that earthquake. Supposing you were to have an earthquake at not like say a Richter scale of 1 or 1.5, and it's just there, just shaking. It doesn't disturb anything, but it just shakes. So the minute you wake up also, you find your mind is actually an earthquake on a Richter scale of 1, 1.5. It's just going on and on and on and on. Uparama means bringing quietude to it. How? By withdrawing it from these associated vrittis. ऑब्जेक्ट्स एंड सेंसेस का जो कनेक्शन से जो डिस्टर्बेंसेस हो रहे हैं और मन फिर बाहर निकल जाता है और फिर एक थॉट दूसरे थॉट के साथ जुड़ता है. वन इम्प्रेशन triggers another impression, that impression triggers another impression, and it's like those games that you have. One more example, very good, thank you. That games that you have, those card things that you have, and then you flip from one here and go it's like a train that keeps going on. And then, so this is what happens to our mind. You trigger it from one place and it triggers so many impressions within us, and then every ragdvesh then suddenly comes up, and then now half a day is gone, sometimes months have gone, sometimes years have gone of our life on the same impression that we are still living with. This is lack of Uparama. Uparama means, normally the word Rama is a very strange a combination of words. Rama normally means reveling. Ram dhatu. And I joke very often in the class that Ram, that English Ram must have come from this Ram dhatu. Sanskrit Ram dhatu means Ramana, जिसमें तुम revel करते हो. So the word has been picked up from there. So the English Ram became Ram. So Ram means reveling. Uparama means withdrawal from whatever the minds were preoccupied within the external realm. इंद्रियों के कांटेक्ट को बना के जो मन प्रीऑक्यूपेशन में रहता है, वो मैंने क्या खाया था, मैंने क्या बातें की, मैंने उसने क्या कहा, उसने क्या करा, मुझे अब ये करना है, मुझे वहां जाना है, मेरे को ये अच्छा लगता है, मुझे उसने ऐसा क्यों कहा, मुझे उसने वैसा क्यों नहीं किया, मेरे को ये करना चाहिए था, मुझे वो नहीं करना चाहिए था, अब उसके वहां वो हुआ है, उसके वहां वो होने वाला है, अब उसके बाद फिर वहां पे वो होएगा, फिर उसको मुझे वहां नहीं कुछ करना है. Either Shant, the minute you kept quiet, that Shantata that comes for a moment, the minute I withdraw from all this, what happens to the mind? It's not gone sleepy. It's not gone zombie. It's not become non-impressionable. Without any active impression, you are keeping the mind in its own place. And then further, this mind is now going to get engaged into the discovery of this nature. Conscious, I am, I know, but actually I don't know. I am a conscious being, I'm a living entity. And I again say, I often compare myself with this mosquito or, and nowadays my comparison is with the virus. Which amongst us is not a living being? The virus is a living being, may not be how we recognize livingness, but it must be a living being. I gave you the example of the pigeon last class. There's a pigeon which is making a nest probably, and it's making a nest in your thing, a so-called human, क्या कहते हैं उसको, boundary or human territory, and you have encroached upon their territory. It's making a nest there, and you know that it's a cumbersome thing, so you don't want the bird to make a nest there, and you are about to go there and you find the bird is restless. कुछ agitated सी लग रही है, कुछ anxious लग रही है. And when you are careful, you hear that the other bird has already laid the egg, and that bird is actually calling. Even when you're moving this bird away, This bird is anxious to the call of that bird, which I as a human will not understand what this bird is telling the other bird, and this bird needs something that that bird, in spite of, say, a human interference, wants to reach this. Is this not a living process? Is this no sign of livingness? How is it different from my livingness if I want something and I call out to someone and someone tries to reach me and someone tries to obstruct, and still, if the other person cares for you, will still try to reach you? All this is your conscious nature. But that conscious nature that I am actually so, accustomed to, acclimatized to, oblivious of, or at least I am so preoccupied with. Vedanta only says, कोई दोष नहीं है, बस यही है कि तुम्हारा मन बहुत preoccupied है. That you're not registering the simple facts of life. What is the simple fact of life? The simple fact of life is you, the conscious being, is independent of all the objects in the world. That's a fact of life. But that fact seems to not provide me bread and butter. That doesn't give me health, and that doesn't give me the fuss. This is where Vedanta starts to say that you think there's dependency. Now watch this. That you think there is dependency for your life is where the whole mind gets engulfed with its preoccupations, with its sensations. And so it's a ball rolling thing. You set it off to want something, then it sets it off to want something else, and then the whole process goes on and on and on. And this is withdrawal from it. So in the sense of, real sense of the word Uparama, it means withdrawing the mind from its preoccupations and leaving it in its own natural state. And don't worry what its natural state is. Shastra has already told us it's an impressionable mind, which means if your mind is quiet, take it as a test. If your mind is quiet and you go to a new place, don't think just remain quiet. Means you may be talking, but your mind is quiet. You may be, if it's quiet, and later on when you reach your destination, you will realize you will remember so many things of the way, right? If someone has already known it, you will remember the smells, you will remember, though you may not be very conscious at that moment, but later on you can recall it. Because the mind had already received the impression. The smell, or what the friend was talking, or things that may not be actually actively engaged in your immediate thing, but later on available. That's that quietude of the mind. So withdrawal of the mind is a healthy sign needed every here and now. That your capacity to withdraw from, I am putting the title as non-essentials of life. Your ability to discern what is non-essential in life, at least starting from there and clipping away the preoccupations that seem so keeping you busy in life, keeping us all busy in life. Everyone's busy doing what? Bhagwan jane. In fact, Bhagwan to nahi hi janta hai, so it's a very wrong way of saying it. Bhagwan ko kya pata tum kya karte ho? Pata nahi kya bolo, you're just preoccupied doing what? It's wrong to say Bhagwan jane. Bhagwan nahi janta. Because it's silly. Why? Because what we are so busy engaged with are non-essentials. And that non-essential bhi jab hum chhod dete hain, you will get quietude. That quietude is Uparama. This author says one of the way to remove non-essentials is stick to doing what is to be done. If you discipline yourself to just concentrate doing what is to be done. That is why I used to say initially many years ago, Vedanta mein sunna zyada zarurat nahi hai. But if you're a prepared person and you hear, and you will realize just to do what you ought to do can consume half your life. Just sticking to one principle, one discipline can take away 10 years of my life, 5 years of my life, because Depends on how much are we trained beforehand by ourselves. Nobody is going to do it for us. So what really means in Vedanta is that those who have this capacity at will to withdraw. One of the things that we used to say कि जब आप क्लास में आते हैं, now here it's not possible on an online class, but जब आप क्लास में आते हैं तो आप हमेशा everybody removes their chappals outside. Or when you go to mandir, any respectable place, you remove your footwear outside. At least in our traditions, we do know. Why do you remove the footwear? Because footwear is a symbol of the mind running everywhere. चप्पल पहन के बाहर निकलते हैं ना हम. So the minute you enter a sanctum of learning, the minute you enter that, the moment you remove the footwear, you are automatically suggesting to yourself, switch off, like I was saying, is the meaning of invocations. Switching off the preoccupation of the mind, and temporary, yes, because it's a long process of learning, or it is still I'm absorbing it, I still have things to do in life. So for that moment, my capacity to withdraw the mind from its preoccupations at my will. Even when we are hearing, especially on an online thing, I'm quite certain it's not as focused. It can't get as focused, especially if you listen to recordings later on. While you're in the class, it is still so much better. While you're in the, because afterwards you realize that your attention for some time is there, goes for a chakkar, comes back again, goes for a chakkar, and many times it happens that your thing was on and you thought you were hearing, and then second time when you hear it again and you realize, how did I not hear it before? Whereas how was it possible that you could have moved forward without having heard it actually? How did the tape move forward? Preoccupation is such a habit now. It's a habit. Breaking that habit, bringing the mind, disconnecting it, withdrawing it, there is no better word to convey this. Withdrawal. Drawal, drawn with the senses, withdrawn. Rama with the senses, Uparama. Returning it back from this preoccupied state. So one of the ways this author says is concentrate, doing, focus. Just do what you're supposed to do and it gives you a great mental freedom. हमें लगता है नहीं हमारा mind बहुत busy रहेगा. But actually just doing what you're supposed to do, even when you are doing and busy the whole day, physically busy, you find more and more your mind becomes quieter and quieter. This is Uparama from this author. Viveka Chudamani, I'm saying I'm doing it at two different texts because these two authors seem to be conveying it at two different stages. Viveka Chudamani seems to be saying it at a more advanced level only in the sense that it is more closer to the mumukshu, those who aspire for the higher. So those who can dedicate life, more time, more energy for their growth than, say, a grahastha who would be involved in his family duties also and things like that. In this particular verse, and this will take some time, I'm again starting. This particular verse, he says, what is Uparama? He says, Bahya analambanam prittehe esha uparatihi uttama. The best kind of a understanding of uparati is, you may call it, there are teachers who would say it's the best kind of an uparati. There are teachers who have said there is best definition of an uparati. My personal thing would be, I feel this is the when he says the best, he means this is the best withdrawal possible before you can start engaging your mind into the higher study. What is that best possible? He says, Bahya analambanam vrittehe. I've already explained the word vritti, that is why I explained it before. Vritti, translation will be thought. This vritti, that impressionable thought, which is constantly outside, resting outside on objects is called alambanam. When your thoughts are resting on outside objects, that alambanam is the object. External objects is the alambanam, depending on them for your thought activity. वृत्ति तुम्हारी बाहर की चीजों को के सपोर्ट से वृत्ति बन रही है. That's all that you're doing. You're only engaged in external actions and processes which are forming the vrittis. Analambanam means your vrittis are not dependent on the external things. Bahya analambanam means my capacity of the mind in its withdrawal is not dependent upon the external things on itself. The person is not dependent on external things and its activities and people, etc. And then the vrittis are forming. This alambanam word, I'm going to take a little time and explain. It's a very beautiful idea in Shastra. Alambanam is, say, the very first image here on the left. What is this? Because we know it's a Shivaling, but otherwise, at the moment, it's a rock. It's just a rock. This rock, patthar, has been carved in a particular shape. That's it. It could be a sculpture. To anybody else in any other custom tradition, those who don't know about this, say a African, they may have somebody who doesn't have any idea of Hindu culture. This is just a beautiful culture. Many people, Krishna, because he can be so attractively dressed and adorned, so many people just keep it as a showpiece. It's just a showpiece because it's looked upon as a sculpture. It's looked upon as a sculpture. This is just a rock. Its real identity is just a rock. But here at the right image, now what has happened? कुछ आलंबन किया इस rock पे. There is something that you have dressed it with. In your vritti, what have you done? On this piece of rock on the left side, which was rock in your vritti, इस vritti पे आपने आलंबन कर दिया है. And that alamban here, dressing your vritti, externally you got this. Once you see this now, this is worship of Shiva. It has become a means for puja, archana. It has translated into action. Alamban is that mechanism with which you have converted a simple perception into worshipful action. This rock by itself means nothing. If I was not born the way I am born, in whichever culture I am born, and I am born in another culture, trust me, I would have loved this and I would have said, why don't I have come to India, say, as a tourist, and I like this, and maybe I'd like the crystal one, and I'd like to I'd take it back with me as a memento. When I go to Niagara Falls, I bring a memento from there. I go to India, I take a memento from here. This is a memento. It means nothing. The fact is, it's just a rock. But the same rock, you convert it into karma. The genius of this Vedic Shastra is, I can't explain it fully probably. Is how to convert all our impressions into either karma for the sake of eligibility, and then the same thing will become into mananam for the sake of knowledge. That you are a conscious being, you will have to discover sooner or later. Take billion janmas, take as many yugas, but there is no escape from this. Till you know it, you will be ghumo, 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 ghumo. Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani jathare shayanam. Iha samsare bahudustare, kripaya pare pahi murare. Bhaja govindam, bhaja govindam. Govindam bhaja mudhamate. Mudhamate. So you're deluded in thinking there is something here. Till you know who you are as a conscious being, your conscious being has got identity. Not as you with the form and the name, but you've discovered its independent status. Now in Facebook, in the evolution of the Facebook, they showed it in the movie. When the Facebook was developing as Facebook, and then there was this status. One day Mark got a moment of how further to improve it, because those friends needed to know who is free, who can be dated, who cannot be. So he introduced their status so that others have a clarity. Are you engaged? Are you, what is it? Are you something, whatever. Status. What is your status? This consciousness, what is its status in you? If its status is engaged with the body, engaged with the mind, engaged with the name, engaged with the birth. If it's engaged with the birth, punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, again and again, again and again. You will have new body, new name, new form. Endless. Till when? Till you have the status single. Means unoccupied. This is the real me. Till that status is returned to its original state, which means I am independently. I as I is not this I. Conscious being that I am, that consciousness is independent, and there lies its truth. This I with its name and form is not the truth. It's your Viveka and Vairagya will now tell it's just a mithya. So what has Alambanam done? I have taken this as a detour to give you an extra principle here, which is actually not so much in this context, but because these classes are only weekly and there are these benefits that can come out of these occasional extra points to be introduced in it, which you may just, in some other context, they may come out, which may. So I'm just introducing them for that sake also. With the help of this, you will realize the whole realm of puja, archana, all nitya karmas, everything that you will hear as karma in the realm of what Vedas had said, hinges upon alambanam. So till you have this consciousness, you are as a complete knowledge in itself. Till then, we are entangled with our jiva drishti, individual perception. We are defaulted by the individual perception. And that individual perception keeps us preoccupied, wanting to change to better and better and better and better. And external is the only movement it goes to. By changing external conditions, by making them better, I'll become better. Of course, they'll be conditional. But unconditionally who you are. So that recognition alone is going to make a person free from this cycle of punarapi jananam. So for which I'm saying, Shastra says इसको पहचानने के लिए was the eligibility, and in the eligibility your capacity to withdraw the mind from its preoccupations, आलंबन जो कर लेता है on non-essential objects. The principle is this. Now when I see a rock, I'll show you both examples now. When I see the first figure on the left and I see it only as a piece of rock and a beautiful sculpture, I want to possess it. If I like it, I possess it. If I don't like it, I don't even notice it. You know, when you go to any exhibition anywhere, आपकी जो वृत्ति है ना, आप उसी को देखते हो, उसी ऑब्जेक्ट को देखते हो, आपकी जो जो वृत्तियां हैं. So supposing as a tourist, if I'd come to India, born in Alaska, and I have come to India as a tourist, now if I didn't have some previous vrittis of this form, this culture, it won't take my attention. But if I have a vritti, suddenly I'll like it. What happens if I like it? What will be the next thought? I want it. If I like it, I want it. If I want it, means I want to possess it. I want to own it. I want some independent contact with it, exclusive to me. That's why I want to own it. Thinking that like I will replicate. Every time I see this, I'll replicate it. This is what is alambanam. In the sense, जो हम already विषयों पे कर रहे हैं. शास्त्र ने क्या किया है? The genius method, I say, is the same thing where your mind anyway it's perceiving all objects and forms. Everywhere they placed certain means to make it as a change the level of your contact with the same object. Change the way you contact the same object. So now the minute I have a different alambanam on this, I do the Daivi alambanam on it. I do the Shiva alambanam on it. Do I want to possess it? Do I want to buy it? Do I even think it will ever be a material transaction with it? Do I look at the change of vritti? If you get this, there's so much joy to I don't know what all. No longer do I want to possess this object. Not only not possess, it has changed the way I look on that object to such an extent that now my mind has changed for some time. The minute I see a Daivi Drishti on it, I impose a Daivi Drishti. Now that Shobhana Adhyasa that we do on objects, impose the pleasure on it, it's something similar. This imposition is the thing that we are constantly doing. Because mind has already got the impression, Shastra says, जहां जहां ये इंद्रिय जाती है, वहां वहां उसको दैवी impression बना दो, impose आलम्बनम उसको दैवी कर दो. That is the reason why Hinduism has 32 lakh and multiplied more gods. Wherever possible your indriya can go, you will find that object or that perception can be divinized. In any form, it goes to knowledge, knowledge gets divinized. It goes to power, power gets divinized. It goes to sights, traveling. Oh, I love traveling. Every human being has the same desires. Let's please understand that. It's not very varying. All of us are. So if I love to travel, Tirath. देखना है नई जगह देखनी है मेरे को नई जगह देखनी है जहां नई जगह देखने का मन करता है सब सुंदर जगहों को आप तीर्थ बना दो. What happened? The same place now cannot become a bhoga for you. When I want to possess this object, I looked upon it as a means for bhog. I had a bhoga drishti on it. I wanted it. Remember me, the Alaskan? As me, the Alaskan, who's come to India, in those, and gone to Rishikesh. And Rishikesh by Ganga Kinare, I'm fascinated to see the sadhus with their matted hair, and I just love the Indian culture, love what the, and I want to carry a memento, and then this seems so nice. I can carry it in my backpack, and so I carry it with me. कुछ भी नहीं हुआ, same object. And the minute you meet your Hindu friend or somebody and they say, oh, and they'll do this. And you're like, what are they doing? So you, the Alaskan, will buy it and enjoy it and keep it. Bhoga drishti. But you, the Indian, if you've had the samskar, not necessary, but if you've had the samskar, the minute you see it, you will do this. What happened? It's not stupidity. It's not foolishness. It's not delusion. It's actually the most intelligent way of preventing the bhoga drishti from becoming powerful in us. Human beings are terrible consumers. We have seen this. We are now seeing it. We are seeing it in the beginning stages of Kali Yuga. As time moves forward, the less and less alambanam of objects, the less and less we see them as divine, the more and more we will have consumerist attitude, the more and more the consumerism attitude we have, more and more bhoga, this is happening in us. Jitna bhoga drishti hamari badhti hai, we want to possess, we want to occupy, we want to keep it, and then you want to preserve it, and then you don't want to give it to anybody. Then you have fear that somebody will. Sab vikar man mein chal. Ek impression se that I want to have it, you will find that your mind has a series of thoughts. It's a thought train after that. Uncontrolled thought train. That is what Shastra says. Mano nigraha meant stopping it at the level of the mind itself. Then you saw senses you stop it at. Once you have stopped it at these two levels, now you must hold the mind without this alambanam, habitual alambanam that we have placed it in. So withdrawing it and again. In the previous verse of Dhamma, he said, Muhurmuhu, dosha drishtya muhurmuhu. Keep seeing, to break this habit of wanting to find happiness from the world, keep seeing the flaws again and again. And so you find that this salam, I'm saying, repeating myself again for the sake of clarity, in case it's missed out, I have introduced alambanam particularly in this context so that you get the wider view of it, so that you understand in the realm of Uparama. In Uparama, this is not the alambanam that we are doing. In Uparama, the alambanam is already there with the objects, just as in the first example on the left side, seeing a stone as a stone. Wo alamban to ho hi raha hai. I want it. I want to possess it. Bhog is already my drishti, because I don't find I am full. I have a short life. I want to live and I want to enjoy. Eat, drink, be merry. I'll try harming nobody, but if somebody gets harmed in the process, not my problem. Their karma. That's a joke, So this is the way we, Uparama here, this particular Vivekachudamani author takes the stand of Uparama from the standpoint of a person who wants to make his time on the planet in this living form more available for his reflection and contemplation of the truth. Understanding fully well this fact that human life is not an easy life to gain, however much we may complain of population, however much we may complain of overpopulation, human birth from the standpoint of Shastra is proportionately in least percentage compared to other living forms. If you compare all living forms, human birth is a very, very, very small percentage from the standpoint of Shastra. And that human birth is that small percentage is not an easy gain. And that small easy gain that one has already found oneself with, Shastra says, your only possibility is you can discover through the right means what is this truth all about of this existence that one finds everywhere. What is the truth of existence? What is the truth of life? And to do that, if it was only as simple as cause and effect, it could have been processed in a laboratory. But this is not cause and effect. This is already a viable experience, just not pointable, recognizable, because our minds are engaged. And Shankara says it in another text, not only our minds are engaged terribly, we are even non-thinking people. So ना विवेक है हमारा बुद्धि, ना हमारा वैराग्य है. Preoccupation से withdrawal is going to contribute to vairagya. Remember I said one beaker down, down, down. Each one will give strength to the other quality. So Shama Dama will give strength to Uparama. Uparama will give strength to Shama Dama. These are not one-time efforts. These are disciplines that the person keeps in the lifelong. जब तक ज्ञान की निष्ठा नहीं होती है, शास्त्र कहता है, इन disciplines को जिंदा रखो. फिर let the world say whatever they want to say. That's your choice whether you want to walk with the world or not. And how much you want to walk, because not everybody can walk. So whatever you will put effort to know yourself will never get wasted. That effort will not go wasted. So you will only continue every time from the same where you left it. So in this sense, I hope the topic is clear. Alambanam, analambanam. We can go back to this definition now. Bahya analambanam. These external things I'll next time maybe put up. I wanted to, didn't have the time, but say put up a lot of images in your screen. You can see all those dresses or all food and all whatever else. There are only five things that occupy people's minds. There's nothing much variety there. All the time looking at it and engaging with it, things like that, etc. That's alambanam, withdrawal from that. And this withdrawal is fairly relaxing, quietening. It buys you the leisure, the space in the mind, time. It gives you everything, makes you free from this overburdening the capacities. When your vrittis have, stopped doing the alambanam, the vritti is not doing the alambanam on external things, means it now remains by itself. That is Uparama. And alambanam by itself, I have also explained, I'm summarizing, I've also explained the beauty of this. Because alambanam is already happening, Vedic vision was जहां जहां होता है वहां वहां divine कर दो उसको. जहां जहां भोग दृष्टि है हमारी, like on water we are extracting more than we need. The planet is going dry, but before the planet goes dry, make water worshipful. Before we start consuming heedlessly the animals, make animal divine. So you will have cow worship. Why do you have cow worship? Cow is just a cow. That's why the people don't understand. If you don't understand alambanam, you cannot understand Hinduism. And because you don't understand Hinduism, even Hindu doesn't understand Hinduism, therefore, you will either have fanatic holding on to rituals, or you will have modern people who say this is all useless stupidity. But there cannot be any more intelligent, practical life where you sustain the ecology, you sustain the sociology, you sustain the psychology. I mean, all the logis didn't need a significant place in society. They all have come about as specialized branches because we stopped living according to the principles that you need to live upon. Unless until you impose divinity on every consumable object that your mind goes to, you will not. Mind's nature, the senses nature is such that you can't stop it. So the greed will grow. And who can stop it from outside? The greed. Nobody can put a limit to greed. You have to put it yourself, and it's not easy once it's developed. Therefore, you will find the joy of. Once you understand this, karmas become your freedom. For a Vedantin, karmas don't bind them, but they are just as a toy. Adult is free from, a Vedantin is free from this, and that freedom from those karmas is the literal sense of Uparama and the technicalist sense of Uparama applicable only in the sannyasa ashrama. So there are 3 levels at which it is done. At the grahastha level, at the normal levels, first level of entry point, say, stick to doing what you should be doing. Swadharma Anushtan is Uparama. The second is what Vivek Chudamani has said. He says, if you have started doing what you should be doing, you still find that your mind goes on imposing, preoccupy ho jata hai. Start withdrawing it from there. Start removing interest in those things which are non-essentials. And the minute you do this, this is now the second layer. And the third layer is in the context of those people who took, say, we just want entire life of ours spent on the discovery of truth. So we give up our families, we give up our professions, we give up all needs within us, and we will let society sustain our needs. For such people was said, Uparama means get freed from the realm of cause and effect. Karam ki ab aapko avashyakta nahi hai. No karma is necessary. Aapko alamban, that karma was going to bring you punyam and avoid papam, that punya pap is no longer your necessity. So you are freed of it. Uparama meant you choose to give up the realm of earning punya and pap. If there's no clarity on the third point, I'll repeat it in the next class again. Just the third point, this Uparama and the Sanya, just for its information, because it does make a lot of difference when you know that. And then what really is Uparama meant for? So with this, I think I'll stop the class here. Divya, you want to do the Shanti mantra?
Repeat after you, Deepti ji.
Okay. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah.
Sarve bhavantu sukhinah.
Sarve santu niramaya.
Sarve
santu niramaya.
Sarve santu niramaya.
Sarve bhadrani pashyantu.
Sarve bhadrani pashyantu.
Ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhave.
Ma
Kaschit dukkha bhag bhave.
Dukkha bhargave.
I will type this next time. Hopefully I get the time. I'll type this next time so that you will have it in front of you to repeat it. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Thank you.